There we go. Now, if you go to the metaphysics section, I'm laughing because it's worth laughing at, of any bookstore, it's full of a bunch of new age garbage. Yeah, like petting your magic rock and wearing special crystal. It's such much of illogical, nonsensical rubbish. That's what you'll find in the metaphysics section of any bookstore. Genuine metaphysics, however, is something completely different. It's logical, it's intelligent, it's wise, it follows Occam's razor. It's hyperlogical, actually. It really actually is. Solved one of the, you're welcome, solved one of the great mysteries of a particular aspect of metaphysics, and it is hyperlogical. Super is. Did I just say super is? Sorry about that. I don't know if you know what a cold cathode is, or if you know what a cathode versus an anode. Anode's the positive side. Cathode's the negative side. We get to be talking about a battery. Typically like a cold cathode, like in an X-ray tube. There are various different, like a Crookes, not a Crookes, but the one created by J.J. Thomson. He's the actual guy that came up with the word electron, J.J. Thomson. By the way, he said it wasn't a particle. He said it was 1 unit of dielectric induction, which is accurate, by the way. But we're not here to talk about modern science and, you know, the so-called electron particle. I've made countless videos on that. Talking about many millions of people have witnessed this. And they'll be in a place where many people have passed away, either horribly, tragically, yada yada. And there'll be moving cold spots, or there'll be instantaneous manifestations of incredibly, and I've actually experienced these before. I was even in a room, went there, a young guy, perfectly healthy. He was about like 25 years old at the time. He wasn't a drinker. He wasn't someone doing illicit substances. And his living room was just normal temperature, but when we went into his kitchen, where he sat down, he said he spent most of his time, it was colder than an ice box. You tell this guy was possessed. True story, by the way. True story. Colder than my buddy that I went there with, he went there to visit him. I didn't know who this kid was. He just endlessly flapping his lips, as he typically does, blah, blah, blah. Lip flapper. I was just freezing. I got a lot of natural fat insulation on me. I was just freezing to death. It was just colder than an ice, but the rest of the house was not. Well, about a month or so later, he mysteriously died. I can't figure out how I know how he died. He was possessed, and the possession killed him. It wasn't because he had a bad heart or, he died in the house. He was possessed. There was a demon in there, by the way. But many investigators of places that are, horribly cursed for countless reasons, there will be these moving and or stationary cold spots. And they've illegitimately said nonsensical things such that, and disembodied being is all it is. The word ghost is so loaded and full of so much bunk. You say ghost, people say, I don't believe in ghosts. I love it when people say that. It's like, oh, so what about a radio? It's like, what about a radio? So if I smash the radio, does the signal still exist? Well, of course it does. Well, what you agreed to just now doesn't agree with what you just said a second ago. Of course, I don't care what anybody believes in. What people believe in has almost never any connection to the truth, facts, logic, or wisdom. So you don't believe in ghosts. All right, I don't believe in ghosts. They exist. Well, a ghost is just a disembodied being. That's like me stupidly thinking that, and of course this is, being fed remotely via Wi-Fi, that if I were to smash this computer, I'm doing something to the signal. And of course I'm not. Death is not the opposite of life. It's the breakup of life. It's the end of life. Life, of course, the consubstantiality of matter and spirit. When you smash the radio, you've done nothing to the signal. This is just simplex logic. Anyway, getting back to the cold spots. I don't know if you know what a cold cathode is. You can look up what they are. It is the case in first experimentation with X-ray tubes that when the anode would heat, the cathode would chill. Fascinating phenomena. Yeah, the answer for that is really rather easy. Like, for example, if you had one room that was, say, 72 degrees, right? Just one room. Person were to walk into it, because we burn calories, we generate heat, right? You know, you can see human heat on thermal infrared. A human being enters a room, it's going to heat the room up. It's going to rise above 72 degrees because human beings are just kind of like this fire, almost, not intense, of course. However, when a disembodied being manifests or enters that room, people have actually felt these disembodied beings grabbing their arm. They're like, oh my gosh, my arm all of a sudden is colder than, it may be hotter than the Hades, where the person is standing. There are many, many, many examples of this. Their arm would chill down, just get super frigid, or there'll be this lingering envelope of intense, insane cold. It has nothing to do with the air conditioning or anything like that. So it's unbelievable. And they've ignorantly concluded and unintelligently concluded that disembodied being is actually drawing energy from the ambient environment, but they're not. It is no different than a cold cathode. Like so when a disembodied being enters into that same room, for example, it will chill. Disembodied beings are cathodes by nature of their being. By the nature of an existential psychophysical being, where we consume calories and eat food, and that generates heat, and right? Well, actually, a human being is kind of, not exactly, but nearly so, an anode. It's actually creating the dissipation of energy. Kind of like a nuclear blast sends out this enormous heat wave. This is a simple test anybody can perform. I don't know if you've ever done this. We did this as kids. Take a rubber band, you'd cut it. You don't have to cut it. But you could take it across your lip, because that's kind of a lot more sensitive around your lip. And as you take the rubber band, you hold it loosely, and you stretch it across your lip, you'll feel it heat up a lot. Yeah, it's kind of, we were listening to the teacher rolling our eyes, and we like stretch a rubber band across our lip, and get hot. And as you let it go back to compression, it chills a lot. You can feel it. It chills. You're actually moving towards entropy. So I'm actually expending calories and energy to stretch out that rubber band. Yeah, I'm actually causing rarefaction, because the rubber band is getting thinner and thinner. If you pull it too much, rubber band's going to snap, right? Obviously so. Creating rarefaction. I'm actually sending energy into the rubber band with my calories spent. I'm pulling it apart, and you can feel the heat in the rubber as I bring it back together, which is the opposite of energy. I'm not same thing as gravity, which is not a force. The opposite of force is acceleration. So move towards counter space. We're actually causing compression back to the normal state of the rubber band. The heat dissipates it so fast it actually chills. This is the exact same thing that's going on with these disembodied beings. By the way, the word cathode, in the case of where the word comes from, it means descent, which is very accurate. It's a move towards counter space. It's the opposite of force. Human beings are letting off heat. We are kind of a crude equivalent of an anode, the positive end, an anode. Cathode's the negative end. Cathode effect in the air, the rarefaction of the air's molecular movement and energy, is dissipatory when it comes to these disembodied beings. They have a cathodic effect of move towards acceleration towards counter space. It's no different than in an old, you can still buy them, they're very dangerous to even think of messing with, an old X-ray tube. When the anode heats up, the cathode chills. Now these are in vacuum sealed glass little envelopes, and people found that fascinating early on, and you're not taught this stuff in high school or college. You can look it up, type in cathode cooling, type in cold cathode. You can read about where the anode heats up, in case of a cold cathode, and the cathode chills. It refrigerates. There are certain devices that actually take advantage of this phenomenon. Just like that stretch rubber band analogy, which is the most simple one that I could think of. This is what's going on. They're not actually taking energy from the air, like, oh, that's why it's so cold all of a sudden. We know there's a disembodied being here, and it's chilled. There's this envelope of cold air here. because they're taking energy out of the air. No, they're not actually taking energy out of the air, but the air is drastically chilling. There's a cathode effect in the same way a cold cathode tube, like an old X-ray tube, like the first ones created by J.J. Thomson. They've been around since much of the early part of the 19th century. It's like, when you turn these things on, it's like, well, the anode's really hot, and you got to keep it chilled somehow externally with a fan or whatnot so it doesn't burn up. But within the same device, on the cathode, it's refrigerating. One side's heating up like crazy and the other side's chilling. So you have this binary effect of the charge and discharge. We have the exothermic reaction that we have from burning calories from food. Human beings generate heat, obviously so. Everybody knows that, but all these disembodied beings are cathodic. They are like cold cathodes, cathode end of a cold cathode. They are, we could say, interdimensional beings, but these beings exist in counter space. And of course they're manifesting by means of their ignorance and their delusions and their desires, on and on and on, which is the definition of hell. They're manifesting, but as they manifest, they become a cathode, a free-floating, quasi-intelligent, by intelligent, the ancient Pali word is monomayakaya, because they actually call it the dibakaku, the heavenly eye, but this would be the consciousness of, not existential consciousness, but a transcendent metaphysical consciousness of a disembodied being. And metaphysics is actually hyperlogical. There's nothing like wackadoodle, burn sage and, wave crystals and other sort of, wackadoodle nonsense. Any idea that people suffer from, and a lot of people do suffer from it, the idea that metaphysics is somehow illogical or, fringe. It's like, that's craziness, man. It's not the case. I said, if you do go to the metaphysics section of a bookstore, that's all you'll see is a bunch of fringe wackadoodleness, which I know is not a word. But this is the reason why disembodied beings, when they manifest or they grab someone's arm or shoulders, or somebody walks into where a disembodied being is projecting themselves, even though they're completely invisible. However, more often than not, they're invisible in the near infrared, because human beings can only see about that much of the electromagnetic spectrum, which is essentially nothing. But they create a cathode effect of chilling by nature of what they are, which is a disembodied being. Psychophysical existential beings, of course, burn calories. We're positive anodes. The consubstantiality of matter and spirit making the psychophysical persona non grata, Bob Larry, is a hot anode. And it's like a fire that constantly has to be stoked. Instead of feeding a fire, we're feeding our bodies food and liquids, and we're generating heat. These disembodied beings are exactly the opposite. They are cathodes, and they cause a fascinating chilling effect. Anyway, so that's the answer that no one's been able to answer, that I, of course, have. You're not going to find this information anywhere on the internet, and it is the logical, intelligent, and accurate explanation for why disembodied beings actually create these cold spots. There's nothing hooey about it, and by hooey I mean New Age rubbish, because I have no connection to the New Age movement. True, genuine metaphysics is logical, intelligent, wise, and it is no less scientific than anything else. There is nothing fringe, or you have to have a leap of faith to understand it. It's like, you have to have a leap of faith. Well, this doesn't make any sense. Well, you have to have a leap of faith. There's none of that involved in genuine metaphysics. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.